Good morning, Professor. This will be my presentation, which essentially demonstrates the executive summary as it pertains to using a subject to demonstrate some of the key factors associated with motor learning. As I previously discussed, I have used this course as a research mechanism for my son, Bryce. He's a 4-year-old male, and he has been diagnosed by occupational therapists as having retained primitive reflexes. Retained primitive reflexes essentially is a term for when infants undergo traumatic births, which is the case as it pertains to him. They're more likely to have the reflexes that they need for survival within the first 4 to 6 months of their existence retained, which creates all kinds of second order effects in terms of hindering their motor development and the way in which their central nervous system processes information. And so, just to continue on the background associated with him, his most prominent retained reflex was the Moro reflex of all the ones tested, although he did come back related to several others. And the biggest significance of those things are, as it displays in him, are sensitivity to light and sound, resistance to change when transitioning in between activities, a lack of command of his fine motor skills, which is again directly correlated to the central nervous system, and then also a heightened likelihood for a flight or fight response. And we've actually seen that demonstrated with him in his behavior at school. We've had multiple negative behaviors that we've had to work through in which he gets into an intense state of rage at school because of this paradigm. So the prescription for this in terms of interventions is occupational therapy. So my wife and I conduct occupational therapy exercises with him twice daily, and he also sees a professional once a week. And so I tried to correlate the subject matter from the prompt directly with exercises that we already execute in order to kind of perfectly, or to the best of my ability, illustrate those concepts in real life. Okay, so before I bring him in here, we're going to introduce the first exercise, which I'm going to be conducting, which is an exercise called popcorn on ball, and it was prescribed by his occupational therapist. For this exercise, he will be asked to pick up an object while his glutes are placed on the ball, so he has to lean forward at the waist and grab those, and then take the object and roll his torso all the way over the ball, and then drop it into a vessel that's directly behind the ball. So with that being said, this is a perfect example of freezing the degrees of freedom associated with Bernstein's model. And the reason why it is because his aforementioned balance issues require me to hold his hips while he conducts the actual skill itself, so that he can maintain balance on that ball. And the reason why I'm doing that is for two specific reasons. One is because it's been shown that in early development it's just better. They're just better off, and often infants and toddlers will independently freeze their degrees of freedom to try to learn new skills before they move on to more variable movement. And then also because of the nature of the rehabilitative exercise having to be directly correlated to strengthening his core and also adjusting his eye line to override those reflexes, I want to prioritize that within its execution more so than I care about his ability to maintain balance on that ball. Simultaneously, because I'm not completely restricting his hip flexion, he should still be able to garner some form of internal feedback about how to execute the activity on his own. So it's not necessarily inhibiting that type of development as he progresses in his occupational therapy. So what I want you to take particular notice of when I conduct this first exercise is his level of alertness by comparison to when he starts right now and all the way through the second exercise. So you can kind of see the difference in his demeanor just based on going through these types of activities. So without further ado, I'm going to bring him and I'm going to demonstrate freezing degrees of freedom with that exercise. Okay, so here's Bryce. And like I said, we're going to go straight into demonstration. Can you say hi to the camera, Bryce?
Hi, camera.
Okay, so we're going to do our activity now. Come over here on this side of the ball, please, buddy. Bryce, come over here on this side of the ball.
Hi, camera.
Yeah, don't throw stuff at the camera, please. Come over here, please. I need you to come on this side. Okay, now can you grab your first toy? So again, observe how I hold his hips as he leans backward and I take him through the process. And that allows him to adjust his eye line so that he can dump it right in there. Notice how I'm also not completely inhibiting the flexion of his hips so that he can still get that type of movement. But it does make, I am confirming every time that his eye position is changing as he executes. Wow, you're doing so good, buddy. And that is the first exercise, which demonstrates specifically that degrees of freedom freezing. Okay, transitioning to my breakdown of the next exercise. So the next thing we're going to move on to is windmills. I've actually discussed this in numerous forums throughout the class. And the reason why I brought it up is because it's an important movement for us to conduct during our morning OT session that we conduct together. And there's a couple of reasons for that. The first of which is that it changes the eye position and promotes balance and core strength, like we've already discussed as the key intervention tactics within retained primitive reflexes.
Stand up, Dad.
And then the second reason is that a 2005 study, which uncovered during the process of my research for the executive summary, indicated that when elementary school students were split into groups, and one of those groups in this case study was asked to conduct mindfulness exercises and walk through them every day, they actually saw extreme benefits to that in terms of their school performance and also just overall behavioral disposition when they were conducting that. And one of the exercises that they recommended as a function of that study, like that they used, was windmills. So we include that in the morning routine to try to promote that type of activity at school because he's had behavioral problems at school directly associated with fight or flight. And that's why we also incorporate things like introducing the olfactory system to intense smells, humming, other stuff like that to ensure that he's successful. Okay, so with that being said, we're going to try to introduce a few additional factors as it pertains to intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, because this exercise is so important to us in terms of his development. We try to add additional motivators associated with that. So when discussing the intrinsic reinforcers associated with the task, because he's 4 years old, he's highly dedicated to making us happy and pleasing his parents, and also is more likely to perform the task repeatedly when he gets positive reinforcement directly associated with that. So with that in mind, like that is his intrinsic motivation, is to please us essentially, and that works out just well. It's a win-win situation for us. From external reinforcers perspective, we try to steer clear of negative reinforcement throughout the execution of these, because obviously we want to continue to incentivize him to do that. However, I will say that because this is a part of his morning routine, he knows that if he doesn't complete his exercises in a timely and thorough manner, that actually ends up cutting into the time that he has to watch TV before he goes to school. So that essentially acts as our really only form of negative reinforcement associated with this exercise. From a positive reinforcement perspective, praise is obviously the number one thing, and there's actually been several studies conducted that suggest that an increase in dopamine from giving incentives and positive reinforcement is directly tied to post-trial memory consolidation. So essentially like his ability to formulate and understand the skill and develop that schema. So I'm going to take two tactics based on the research that I did that I don't normally do with this exercise today. The first is I'm going to promise him an unknown reward. And that's because there's been direct correlation that actually increases attention given to performance. And then there also will be given, there was a study done with rats which suggested that from the perspective of positive reinforcement in the terms of food, that if it was a sugar-based food, that they were more likely to perform. So he'll also be receiving a Skittle in between each one of his successful executions of the windmill exercise. So again, take note of all of the positive reinforcers that I demonstrate while we do this exercise. All right, now we're gonna start with our execution of windmills. Before we do that, Bryce, so guess what? If you complete these windmills successfully, Daddy's gonna take you for a special surprise.
For what?
It's special and a surprise, so you gotta find out afterwards. But you have to be a good boy and do all your windmills, okay?
Is it Skittles?
No, you're gonna get Skittles too every time you successfully execute one, but there's also gonna be another special surprise after.
Oh, dizzy.
Can you get in the windmill position, please?
Too dizzy.
Okay, so for every solid execution that you do of it, I'm gonna give you a Skittle. Okay. So can you do your first on both sides? That's a really good execution, buddy. The other side. Other
Do
side.
Skittles?
You have to do it on both sides first. Remember, make sure that hand's up for that one. Okay, so you get a Skittle now. Wait. Here's your Skittle.
Thank you.
Mmm, delicious, huh? Okay, can you do another windmill? That looks actually pretty good, buddy. Keep that eye line up. Another side. Wow, that's a really good execution. You're doing them pretty well today. All right, let's do one more. And if you do it well, then you get your special surprise. Okay? All right, one more. Wow, that's pretty good. Great job. That was great attention giving. So now you get your special surprise, which is that he gets to go camping. Okay, well,
Skittles.
that concludes my presentation. Hopefully, both of those demonstrations illustrated some of the core concepts that I tried to hint at in my executive summary, specifically degrees of freedom.